Sup you phonies, how's it going and welcome to another Blender tutorial. What would it look like if the moon crashed onto Earth? That would be quite a sad day, wouldn't it? But one of my subscribers sent me a video of a moon crashing into Earth and he asked me how would one do that in Blender, and I figured I'm gonna make a tutorial even though this is my first time doing it. If I make some mistakes, let me know if you know what mistakes those were and we can make it better together. So I shot a little scene outside during daytime of just my street, looking at the sky. This is where the moon is gonna be. And of course I looked at some references. Let's look at them together. Here, this is the moon during daytime. So I thought it's going to be black on the other side, but actually it's going to be invisible, which is very interesting. So let's keep that in mind while we're working on the scene. So we are starting here in Blender. My scene always starts with a camera and my little Michal here. We don't need the camera for now because we're going to track a scene and we're going to create a new camera for that. So I'm going to delete my camera. I'm going to keep my Michal though for scale references. So when I track my scene and I can see if my little Michal is in the proper scale, and that means the moon will as well. Okay, the first thing we do is we go up to the motion tracking tab. If you don't have it here, click on the plus, VFX, motion tracking. Since I have it, just click on motion tracking. Now I'm gonna open my video. That's my video. The first thing you do is click set scene frames. That means that our project is the same length like the video. Now click prefetch. That's going to load the video into your RAM, so it's going to be faster to go through it. So now when we look through it, we have to decide, okay, what are we going to track? And I think I have a pretty good idea. And also, see this little car? It's going to make it a little harder to track because we can't track anything in this area now because the car is moving. But I shot it that way on purpose because I thought if the moon is coming at us, it makes sense that people are trying to escape. So that's going to be cool. Another difficulty is going to be there's a lot of trees going on and we have to position the moon eventually behind all of that. So we're going to try in post and After Effects to rotoscope all of that, and so we can bring the moon behind it. But first, we need to track our footage. I'm gonna go somewhere to the middle of my scene and go on this little icon, go in blurry footage, hit normalize, detect features. Those are the features which are being tracked, and let's just track forward. That wasn't too bad. Let's go to the same frame and track backwards. Now let's go to solve. We're gonna hit keyframe, focal length and optical center, and solve camera. Okay, we have a solve error of 75 pixels. That is not great. Now let's try to find the reason why it's so bad, because it does seem fine. I see that this tracker is being blocked. We're gonna delete this one. Let's see what else is going on. The one up here is working fine. This one is also being blocked, and so is this. Let's keep looking. This one is also a little floating. Okay, I deleted a few tracks. Now let's solve camera one more time. The solve error went up. It's almost 100 pixels now, but let's not worry just yet. It's gonna be just fine. Let's delete the one where the car is. And we can position a few ourselves. Like this here seems like a good place to track. Maybe this one too, and this one. Let's select those three and track them forward and backward. Let's solve it again. Now we have the solve error of 3.12, which is getting closer. We are aiming for something under 1 pixel. Great, we have a solve error of under 1 pixel. And to be honest, that took, 45 minutes. So sometimes it happens right away, sometimes it takes longer. That's just how it is with the tracking, but finally we're done. So the next step is we go under solve and we set our background and set up tracking scene. Now on the top viewport here, we can already see that we have trackers floating around, which is great. When we click 0, we can see, we can look through our camera. When we play the video, we can see that everything is tracking accordingly, which is great. The problem is here, obviously the camera is not aligned yet, and I hope we can fix that with the motion tracking tab, because we don't have that many trackers on the ground, but let's just try. So first we set our origin. For that we hit on 1, which is kind of in the center, and set origin. Now this is where our origin is. Now we need to select one tracker to the side, this one for example, and this is gonna be our x-axis. It almost worked. Let's get to that later. We have to select 3 trackers on our ground, those are on the ground, and set on floor. And that didn't work at all, unfortunately. But I believe this is our only option right now. Let's try these 3. Let's set our origin one more time. It almost works. It's crooked, but it's kind of there. Now we have to adjust our scale, and for that we're gonna select 2 markers where we believe we know how far away from each other they are. This should be around 1 meter. Set scale, and still a little big, but let's hope it's fine. If not, let's just get back here later. So I'm gonna save. So let's go back to our layout tab. On the top here, I want to look through the camera, and now we can adjust the camera a little because we see that it's crooked. So let's try to adjust it. I hope it's gonna work. It's not great. It's not a great workflow, but at least we can try to fix it that way. Try to adjust it that it aligns with our ground. So I'm gonna keep my ground here, but I'm gonna move it into my foreground. I don't know why Blender does that, but it creates a background collection. We don't want this, so we just need our ground, which is gonna be a shadow catcher. So in cycles, we're not gonna see it, but also in cycles, we don't see anything, because when we go to our render properties, go down on film and turn on transparent. Okay. We're getting closer now. Now when we look through it, we can see, unfortunately not in full speed, but we can see that he is where he belongs. So that's why I'm keeping my Miho here, so I can make sure that everything is to scale. The other reason why I like to keep my Miho here is when I adjust my lighting, that all the shadows, they all go in the same direction, my CG shadow and my real life shadow. And for that, I'm gonna need a sunlight. So I'm observing all those shadows. The sun was right behind me over my right shoulder, going to the front into the distance. So I'm gonna rotate my Miho away from us so it helps me understand better. Now I'm gonna create a light by Shift A, light, sun. I'm gonna bring it a little higher so kind of I have an idea where it is. So bring it behind him. It doesn't have to, the position of the sun doesn't matter, it's just the angle. And now I'm gonna rotate it. I'm gonna take a closer look where his shadow is going. So I think the sun was a little, let's make our shadow catcher bigger. So right now it's very angled, it's not that angled. So if I had another object with the same height like him, that would be perfect, but all those shadows are building shadows, so it's hard to estimate. In top view, I can adjust the direction. I try to keep it parallel to this shadow. When I zoom in here, I can see it's pretty much parallel, but because the sun was going down, it's a little too harsh. So under the light settings, I can adjust the angle a little. When I go more into the positive, the shadow is gonna be softer, just like that. It's still a little too angled, so let's fix that, bring it a little down, and approximately that should do. Now, we need to create our moon. And the moon is going to be far in the distance, very far out. It's going to come closer and closer until it hits the Earth. And there's really 2 ways on how to do that. How do we make the moon? How did God make the moon? Or did it just happen? Who knows? You know, who knows really? I definitely don't. But anyways, there's an easy way and a hard way. The hard way would be to model the moon yourself. Find a picture of the moon, create a sphere. Like for example, if I was about to make the moon, I would make a sphere, make it extremely big, bigger, with someone in a distance, shade smooth it, increase the view. This is important as we're gonna have to do that anyways. Increase the view by a lot because we want to see far enough. Same here. And now we have basically the moon. And then I would go on Google, download an image and make a material out of it so it would look like the moon. But I'm not going to do that because I have Blender Kit, which is for free. If you're still not using Blender Kit, do yourself a favor, go download it because it can save a lot of time when you do your visual effects. And now look at that. When I just type in here moon, I have the moon. And now let's look at it. It's just a sphere and looks great. Let's see how detailed it actually is. If it has geometry, no, it's just a texture, but looks good for me. So now we have to bring it far away from us and bring it to a very gigantic scale. Make sure to also in the camera settings, you can adjust the distance, how far you want to be able to see. Also increase that by a lot. Otherwise you're not going to be able to see it. I'm going to bring the shadow catcher, I'm going to make it bigger in the direction where the moon is coming from. So the first thing I want to determine is what's the end scale and end position, because I'm not going to animate the scale. It's not like it's going to grow bigger. It's just going to be the biggest size. Apply the scale. Always apply the scale, otherwise the textures are not going to do what they're supposed to. And let's just see, because I use tracking markers and I want the moon to get as far as the latest tracking markers. So I'm just going to turn them on, motion tracking. So those are my trees here in the background. So let's see what happens if I bring my moon here. Okay, that's going to be too close. I just want to fill the frame. Okay, so this is going to be my last position of the moon. I can hide my ground. So now I need to animate the moon, and it's two different animations. I want him to rotate and I also want him to change the position. And because I have two different animations in the same time on the same object, I would rather get some help with an empty. So let's get an empty in here. Let's do the cube. There it is. Let's make it bigger. Bring it to the place where our moon is. Somewhere in the center. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nice. Now I'm going to select the moon. I'm going to shift, select my empty, hold Control P and parent to object. Now when I move my cube, I'm going to also move the moon. So now I can rotate my moon separately and also the position separately. So I'm going to go to the very last frame, because that's how we're going to start animating. Bring it a little further back, make it a little bigger. Again, it's the first time you're doing that, so I'm not 100% sure how big it actually has to be, if it has to fill the frame, but let's just go with that. So we're going to go to the very last frame, which is frame 446. Now I'm going to click on my box here, go under item and hover over location, hit I. Now I'm going to go to the very first frame and move my moon away from us till it somewhat has a regular size. We kind of know what the moon looks like. So it's kind of like this and up. So that's where the moon is coming from. And now I hover over location again, hit I. Now I created keyframes, but I want them to be linear. Otherwise, right now they're easing in and I don't want that. So I hover over here, hit T and linear. Now when we watch this whole thing, this is just an Eevee. That's not what it's going to look like. We can see that the moon is coming closer and closer and closer. Okay, the first thing I already realized, we gotta do this again. It changes in perspective too fast. That means that right now our moon is actually that close to us. But if it was, it would have penetrating Earth already. So we're gonna undo what we just did. Let's remove our keyframes and we're gonna bring it further back, way further back. And now we're gonna scale it up. So all I'm doing is just moving it further away and scale it up. Okay, let's go to our last frame again, have it fill the frame. Now we go on item, hover over location, hit I, go to the first frame, bring it further back along the x-axis, say like this, bring it up. But this is where the moon is coming from. Hover over location again, hit I, hover over the graph editor, hit T, linear. Now let's look at it. The moon is coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's still coming. Cool. Okay, that was more of a headache than I thought it would be, but I figured it out. All I did was not easing the movement in, but easing it out from the very beginning. So it starts fast and it's slower, 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 so it can just keep coming. Okay, now that is done. Now I'm gonna animate my moon. And for that, I'm gonna just go on the first frame, go on item, go on rotation, hit I, go on the very last frame. And now I'm gonna rotate -y, so it just keeps rotating. I don't know how much yet, but we will see. So I animated the Y rotation, so we can just delete X and Z. We don't want to ease that in. So now the moon is rotating. I don't know why it looks so funny at the edges here. I hope it's just like a render thing because it's so big. Oh yeah, let's just render. Let's just look through cycles real quick what it looks like. Yeah, it's fine. Cool. Now let's go on our sun. Let's make it a little stronger because I want it to be as strong as our like regular light. And back here you can see this part is black because this is where the sun is coming from. And hopefully we can adjust it that it's not going to be black. It's just this part is the only visible part because like the reference showed, that's what the moon looks like. So I think the sun is perfectly adjusted. Maybe it's a little bright. 7. Yeah, that's fine. Now we're gonna render this on a transparent background so we only get the moon, because our next step is in After Effects we have to remove all those trees here, or not remove them but cut them all out. So we need the foreground, like everything here, and the moon actually behind it. So everything what is sky is going to be moon, and that's what we're gonna do in After Effects after this is done rendering. So see you in a few hours. And the render is done. 3 hours later, finally we can continue in After Effects. The problem is, I'll just show you. So we are here in After Effects. We just double click here on the left, and that way we can open our render. This is the image sequence. Select the first one, click on PNG sequence and click on import. This is our imported image sequence here. Now we're gonna double click again because we also need our video. We're gonna import our video first. So this is our clear video without any VFX in it. Now, before we import or before we drag and drop our image sequence, we have to go down here, click on your video, on this little icon, interpret footage, copy this number, very important, and now click on your image sequence, interpret footage again, and paste this number, because that's the exact frame rate we need, because that's how we tracked our footage. If that was a different frame rate, our footage and the video wouldn't be aligned anymore. Very important, don't forget that. Especially in the beginning when I started tracking in Blender, I always messed this up and the tracking wouldn't work anymore. I didn't know why, and it was so frustrating. So keep that one in mind. So now we can drag and drop our video in here. And we can see we have our moon here. And when we look through it, you see my problem right here. It messed up big time. You know what that here is? Why is it cut off like that? Because I deselected the shadow catcher in Blender, but I didn't deselect it in the render, so it still rendered it. That's why it's basically like a mask here. I could have rendered it again, but I believe it's gonna be fine because this part of the actual video is still gonna be on top anyways, so I hope this cut won't matter. I hope so. Stupid idiot. So mad at myself. Anyways, let's continue. So what we're gonna do, you duplicate your actual video. So you have it 2 times on top of each other. You bring this one on top. So we have our video underneath the moon, and underneath that, the video again. So obviously because the video is on top, we don't see the moon anymore. So now we need to find the best way to cut all this out as good as possible. This one too. There's 3 ways of cutting something out in After Effects. They all are called masking, but there are different ways. For example, with the pen tool, I could draw a line and cut all this out. Obviously more precise than I'm doing right now, it's just a demonstration and so on. Eventually you close it and then you cut something out. It's a great way many times. If that was a still frame, that's probably what I would do, but since the camera is moving, this wouldn't work. So let's forget about this one. The second way is very similar, but better for precise work and for moving object. I select the rotor brush tool, double click on my layer. Now I can decrease the size of my brush. Now I can basically just draw, just like with pen and paper. I just draw, and that's gonna make me a cut outline. And I have to be as precise as possible. And the good thing is After Effects itself can figure it out a lot by itself, what I actually want to key out and whatnot. That's another way, but that really is the last resort. Just like with green screen, if you key the green out and then there's still some pieces missing, like the feet or so, then you can cut it out with the rotor brush tool. So this one is the last resort. What we are gonna try to do is to key this guy out just like a blue screen, because it's a blue sky, so let's hope for the best. For that, I'm gonna right click my layer, effects, keying, and let's try key light 1.2. That's the one I would be using if I had a green screen. Now I'm gonna select the blue here, and voila, it's already a pretty good result. You can see parts of my foreground here is transparent, but I think with the keyer we're gonna find some good results, especially here. It's always tricky with trees and branches, and also hair in the green screen. The keying is always difficult, but that's already better than the last time I did that. So in order to refine the mask, I'm gonna go on final result and choose screen matte instead. Here I can see a black and white mask. Everything what is gray, like this is like bright gray, this is dark gray, is just transparent. It's like half transparent, it's see-through. You see in the final result, I can't see through it. So now my job is to try to get this, everything what is tree, everything what is foreground, completely white. And everything what is the sky, completely black. So you can use the screen gain. If I increase that a lot, it just crunches the contrast automatically. It's not always the best way. Let's go to screen matte. Now we can clip the blacks until everything what is black is completely black. So I'm looking at this part here. Go, 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 go. Everything what is supposed to be foreground is cutting out too. But I'm not that worried about this part here, because this car, for example, is blue, so it's just going to be see-through. Again, let's go to the final result. Since this car is reflecting the blue so much, the moon is just going to be behind it. It doesn't matter what we do. But then I can also go back to our first method and just refine the map, make a rough garbage map about here, and everything down here is going to be good anyways. But again, this is going to be the final step. So let's go back to screen matte. So everything was supposed to be white, I crunched it. The number is already pretty high, and like I said, I mostly look at these edges here. Those have to be perfect. Now with the whites, I go to the left until those edges are perfectly white, and you don't want to go too far. As little as possible, as much as necessary. Let's go to final result and let's look at it, and it's pretty good. You see, this is not perfect, but we're getting there. So now let's go back to screen matte, because this is really what I need in the end. So I shrink the screen a little, so that means when I go crazy, it just shrinks it completely. When I go positive, it gives me some material back. So I go a little into negative space, just a little. And then also screen softness. You see those edges here? I'm just gonna make them a little softer, not too much, just a little. Okay, let's go back to final result and let's look at it. It is pretty good. Now, you could leave this part like that now, but what I personally like to do is I have my actual video underneath and adjust this back to screen matte. So this is just in black and white mask. This video underneath, use the track matte, the pick whip, and select the top layer. And now under Alpha Luma matte, you want to click this on, and now it's gonna create a good edge. Let me show you the difference real quick. The problem right now is it's still sticking out the blue here in the background. That's one problem. But look at all those colors here, all the shadows, everything what is a little blue here. When I turn this back on to final result, everything just becomes very black and ugly. It really changes the colors. I don't want all of that. I just want to show screen matte and use this just as the mask. And we're getting very close here. The biggest issue is C, because like I said, all that can be fixed, but the trees here are an issue, and those houses here on the right need some refining. The way we can try to fix it is we're gonna duplicate our bottom layer one more time, bring it higher, and use a different key effect. Let's go back to keying, linear color key. With this one, I can select the blue very close to where our problem is gonna be, and that could fix it. See the difference? Even the tree, it fixed the tree. It didn't fix this tree yet, but it might if we do this again over here. Let's play with the tolerance a little. Match softness, tolerance is good. If we go too crazy with the tolerance, it's gonna bring it all back. So we just go far enough that the roof here is gonna be fine. Again, let's try to use the same effect on our video we used for our keying effect already. Linear color key, select the blue here, and already looks way better. Combined with the effect with the other video, it is almost perfect. The trees are really the biggest issue here, and you can go ahead and refine it and go harder and harder. Another cool effect you can use is the advanced key suppressor, keying advanced key suppressor. This is just gonna invert the blue into green. Here we can pick the blue we want to invert, and we can show how advanced you want to go, but that already looks pretty good. Nobody's gonna ask any questions. Okay, now when I just look at it, I still see some reflections here that we might have to do manually. Let's look on this side here. Yeah, that wouldn't be reflective. So I'll just show you how you could fix those things manually. Again, we're gonna copy our layer, the video, bring this also on top. So now we're gonna draw a few masks with our pen tool, the one I showed you in the very beginning. Draw a mask here. So we're gonna look at all the spots where we could see some kind of flickery going on. There's some here. I'm gonna draw another mask on the glass frame here. That's like a quick solution, you know, just like duct taping it, if you will. And again, let's just go through all the scenes which have a problem. Let's go here. This part is not great. Okay, now hit M, select all masks you have, go on the tracker, and now you can track backwards. That can take a second, but now After Effects is going to try to track those positions. And once this is done, it's basically tracked, so you don't have to animate those masks automatically. Sometimes the tracker doesn't work and you do have to do that manually, but let's just hope for the best. But that's a great way to mask and animate those masks. Very useful. It just takes a minute. That is enough, because now we don't have any moon behind us, and now let's look at it. You can see that you don't see the moon. When we turn this layer off, we can see the moon behind it. Now we can't. Now the masks are going to create very sharp edges. That far in the distance you might not see them, but just in case, click on your layer, hit F for feathering. Now you can feather the masks. This one we can feather a little more. The second one is the one on the right. We can't feather that much because it's right at the edge here. And this one just a little. See? Way better. And that's what we got so far. It looks pretty good. It is not perfect, but you get the idea. Depending on your scene, you can adjust it better and differently. I just saw one mistake. Almost got me there. You see this pole here? It's not behind the moon. I'm glad that I just saw that. So that means our green screen effect, or blue screen effect in that case, didn't work on this pole here. So that needs to be adjusted manually. So we do get to use the rotor brush tool after all. So we're gonna go to the middle frame here, duplicate our layer, bring it also over the moon. Now we need to cut the pull out, basically frame by frame, but thanks to the rotor brush tool, it's less painless than it used to be. So we're just gonna draw a mask, And if you want the result to be good, you want to be as exact as possible. And we just do that for one frame. If you hold Alt, you can negative draw. So that's pretty good. Let's fix this. Here we need a little more. And the more exact you are with your very first frame, the easier it's going to be the rest of the process. Okay, now, back in the days, you would have had to do that for every single frame. Now, when I just hit play and observe the mask, let's make this a little bigger so I can see, because it's moving. Now we can see that it's frame by frame analyzing what kind of shape you want to rotoscope, and it's almost automatically. This is a perfect example where it's like easier because it's like a pretty simple shape, you know, and it's a blue background behind it. So it is simpler. It can be way more difficult than that. So we got lucky here, but you get the principle. The roto brush tool is a very, very powerful tool, which I really highly recommend learning how to use because it's very helpful. So now I analyze forward, and now I can also analyze backward. That should be enough. Yeah, this is where the moon starts entering the pole, and now you can see the problem is solved. Let's look at the before after. You see the moon is behind it, especially here. Now it's not anymore. You see the problem is you see a little bit of the blue sky behind it, but just like with the other masking, you can either feather it, and maybe less, shift the edge to the center. The thing with the roto brush tool is it is way slower than the other masking tools, so only use it if you really need it, but that looks pretty good to me. Awesome. And now what I always like to do in the end of all my VFX, I like to put a noise, like a grain, on top of my footage, because that brings all the footage, like the CG and the real stuff, closer together. That is the one I'm using. That's what it looks like. This one, unfortunately, I can't give away for free, but my Patreons, they have access to that. And obviously that's not what you want. The way you use it is go to mode and overlay. Now there's a grain on the entire footage. We need 2 of those because it's too short. Bring the opacity down because you only want a little of that. Another thing I like to do is putting some lens dirt on the screen. Me personally, I use Video Copilot for that, but you can also use any lens texture you find on the internet, so anything works, but I just like to use that because you have more control. Optical flares is great by Video Copilot. It's not for free, but it's definitely worth it. I've been using that for like the past 12 years. Set this to screen, make it a little flicker. Great. Now, one very important step is, we talked about this before. We looked at the reference image of a moon during daytime. This side is not black like in my scene right now. It's actually invisible because that's how space works, I guess. So now we have to do that. So normally I would say select your moon video, go under mode and set it to lighten, and it looks good, besides the fact that it made the moon very, very red and transparent, so it's probably not the way to go. Let's try to use screen instead. Yeah, screen looks better, but the problem is it brightens everything up and we lose a lot of detail in the moon. But we can adjust that if we can right click, effect, use curves under color correction. Let's try to adjust it a little. So the brights we want to keep where they are and maybe bring the shadows down a little. And just for a comparison, this one is going to be normal without any adjustments. This is with. Pretty cool, right? And now we have the moon coming on Earth. We can even go crazy here and fade this one in the closer it gets, because eventually it would enter the atmosphere and it would actually get a shadow. Maybe, should I do that? When I hit T on my opacity here on my lower layer, decrease it, and click on the stopwatch on 0% opacity, and now I'm going to increase it by time. So now it's animated. That works for me. If you right click on one of them, go on keyframe assistant, easy ease. Now it's slowly coming in. Yeah, I'll do that. Why not? Another thing I like to do when I do VFX like that, I like to wiggle the camera a little and like shake the camera, especially when the moon comes closer. It could be a little more panicky. So what I'm gonna do is go on Layer, New, and Null Object. I'm gonna bring the null object down to the lowest layer I actually want to wiggle. Select all of those layers down here. Make sure to not forget anyone. And use this right pick whip, the parent and link one, and connect it with the null object. So now everything the null object does, for example, I'm gonna only select the null object, scale it up, everything is gonna scale up. Well, at least everything what is connected, which is parented to the parent. The null object is the parent. So now I'm just gonna make it a little bigger, like 104%. And now I'm click on the position, hit Alt on my keyboard, and on the stopwatch, now I can wiggle it. Type in wiggle, and it's say 3.20. Now when I click away, the camera is going to be moving. And especially when your track wasn't perfect, which in my case it is, it's very helpful. So I'm going to do the same thing with the rotation. Click on my null one, hit R, hold Alt, click on the stopwatch, type in wiggle 1,1. So now it's also going to rotate a little. And while we're at it, let's turn on motion blur on all those layers. This is going to make the computer render longer, but I think that step is pretty worth it. And my dear phonies, that's the final result. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about that, let me know in the comments below. Again, it was also my first time doing that, so it was a very interesting experience making a tutorial for something I don't really know how to do, but you know, just don't tell anyone. Anyways, thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video. Toodaloo.